When I was a kid, I had this weird habit of waking up at 3 or 4 in the morning, going into the kitchen, and watching movies on HBO while I ate cereal before school. By that point, I was already in love with the Scream trilogy and had been as long as I can remember. The only two directors I was really conscious of at that age were George Lucas and Wes Craven. So one morning when I was 8 years old, I go down into the kitchen, pour some cereal, and start going through the guide. And I see that a movie called Wes Craven's New Nightmare is about to start. I had never seen any of the other Elm Street films, and I had no idea who Freddy Krueger was. But I saw Craven's name and decided to watch it, and it blew my mind. Throughout the 80s, New Line Cinema pushed Freddy and Elm Street anywhere they could. There was a sequel almost every year, a TV show that ran for 2 seasons, an album where Freddy sings, "Down in the boiler." By the end of the decade, oversaturation started to kick in both with audiences and the people making the films. Freddy actor Robert Englund was exhausted between everything he had to do as the character. Audiences showed their exhaustion with the lackluster box office of A Nightmare on Elm Street 5, The Dream Child, released in 1989. The other slasher series also began to wane with Jason Takes Manhattan and Halloween 5, both disappointing as well. New Line decided to give Freddy one last hurrah before killing him for good and ending the series, resulting in 1991's Freddy's Dead, The Final Nightmare. That film was a big hit, which is always what happens in these scenarios. A series wears out its welcome, so the studio makes a big promotion out of the new one being the last one. And then, because of that promotion, the movie makes a lot of money, which then leads to the studio making more movies because this one did really well. Even though the only reason it did well is because they said it was the last one. So New Line decided to do another Freddy film. They began development on Freddy vs. Jason since they acquired the latter character from Paramount after the disappointment of Jason Takes Manhattan. But that project was slow going and would take over 10 years to finally materialize. So Bob Shaye, the head of New Line, turned to Craven. The director had mostly stayed out of the series. He co-wrote an early draft of Dream Warriors, and that's about it. He had pitched an idea for Elm Street 4, but New Line rejected it and instead made the worst film of the series, The Dream Master. Craven considered Shaye's offer mainly because the money was good, and Shaye offered retribution for the money Craven was cut out of as New Line whored Freddy out any way they could. Craven watched all of the Elm Street films in order to come up with the story for A Nightmare on Elm Street 7. He was largely unimpressed and couldn't figure out a way to continue the story in any meaningful way. Then Craven had a dream. He described the dream saying, "I was at some sort of cocktail party and Robert Englund was there in costume doing Freddy shtick. And I was standing off to the side thinking, this is exactly what's gone wrong with the films. Freddy has become this comedian. Then, off in the corner, I felt this presence, and I looked, and there was a dark shape moving with Robert, parallel to his movements, but much more ominous and threatening." Inspired by this dream, Craven decided to make the film about the people that made the original film in favor of a traditional sequel. The resulting film, Wes Craven's New Nightmare, was released on October 14, 1994. As I said, the story does not take place in the fictional world of the Elm Street films, but in the real-life world of Heather Langenkamp, who played Nancy in the original film and reprised it in the third film, Dream Warriors, before being stupidly killed off. Anyway, Heather is married to a special effects artist, Chase, and they have a young son named Dylan. Heather is starting to have nightmares about Freddy Krueger and has been stalked for weeks by someone that sounds a lot like Freddy. Heather is then offered to reprise her role as Nancy by Bob Shaye, who reveals that Wes Craven is writing a new script inspired by recent nightmares, and that Chase is building a new glove for Freddy. Dylan has been acting strangely during all of this, showing signs of sleep deprivation, and is clearly being tormented by Freddy, which Heather thinks is impossible since she's never allowed her son to even see any of those films. Chase is killed by Freddy, making the mental states of Heather and Dylan much worse. While talking to Robert Englund about the script, Heather realizes that Wes wrote something in the script that just happened and he shouldn't know about. She goes to see Wes, who lays it all out. He suggests that the purpose of storytelling was to trap evil spirits, and, unintentionally, an entity was trapped within the Freddy Krueger character and has been trapped there over the course of the sequels. But now that Freddy is dead and the series is over, this evil thing can be set free. In order to cross over into the real world, Demon Freddy has to kill Heather due to Nancy's significance, first attacking her at her most vulnerable points, her husband and son. Demon Freddy takes Dylan to a hellish dream lair and Heather follows. Heather and Dylan blow the demon up and escape back to the real world. With the film, Craven tried to mess with the line between fiction and reality. Langenkamp was actually married to a special effects artist with a young son at the time, and she had a stalker in real life. Although, interestingly, her stalker was not a result of the Elm Street films, but her ABC show, Just the Ten of Us. Earthquakes are a big part of the film. It's the first omen of the demon's arrival. He's essentially tearing apart the fabric of reality. The earthquakes were intended by Craven to show the fragility of life. Everything can be normal and fine, and then the earth literally shakes. Your world can be turned upside down in an instant. More interestingly, the Northridge earthquake hit California in early 1994 during production of the film. It's just a weird coincidence, but it certainly adds another weird layer to the film. They actually used real footage of debris in the film instead of faking it. New Nightmare is obviously about storytelling and films and their role in society. In general, it's about the relationship between life and imagination. Craven believed that in order to take control of your life, you must first take control of your imagination. Elm Street had a profound effect on everyone involved with it. New Line is the house that Freddy built. Langenkamp is Nancy, and England is Freddy. No matter what else they have done or will do, those roles define them. And that creation completely spun out of their control, Craven especially. It became so much bigger than any of them could have imagined, and other people took Craven's creation and did a variety of things with it. New Nightmare is Craven trying to take control again, in and out of story. My high school English teacher, senior year, said something to our class that always stuck with me, even though I didn't quite get it at the time. Not everything that happens in a story has to be literal. Does Luke Skywalker literally walk into a cave, fight Darth Vader, behead him, and then see his own face behind the mask? I'm sure there's some kind of canon explanation. Please don't tell me. I do not care. But it's not important. It's a visual way to tell us what is happening with Luke in the story. His current mindset is putting him on a direct path to Vader and the dark side. Do storytellers literally trap demonic spirits? No, but we kind of do. Fiction is a coping mechanism. It's one of our easiest and most fulfilling means of expression, whether it's a song, a novel, or a movie. And with horror films, we trap demons. It's a way for us to safely confront and control darkness, the hardest parts of life. It's incredibly healthy, mentally speaking, for both the artist and the audience. The film's secondary antagonist is Dr. Hefner, named after the head of the MPAA during a lot of Craven's career. Nancy takes Dylan to the hospital due to the effects of his sleep deprivation, and this doctor is convinced that it's because he saw some scary movies. She throws a lot of judgment and shame towards Heather. And it's ignorance. Something is genuinely wrong with Dylan, and it's far more severe than a movie upsetting him. Blaming movies for people's problems is an attempt to oversimplify society's problems with an easy target. We saw something similar recently when certain people protested the release of The Hunt. Craven's point is to underline how ridiculous that is, but also show the importance of horror. Without these Elm Street films, this demon would have been unleashed much sooner in story. Craven's work helped to contain that darkness. One of the things I noticed about this film while watching it for this review is that the film is Elm Street from the point of view of the parents. If you watched my review of the original Elm Street, I talked a lot about the relationship between parent and child. Nancy's parents failed her and actively make her situation worse instead of trusting her. In this, Nancy has ostensibly become the parent. Dylan is the movie's Nancy, the main one being targeted and tormented by Freddy. But the movie isn't from Dylan's point of view, it's from Heather's. So we don't see a lot of Freddy for a long time. We just see Dylan's reactions to him in relation to Heather. It's an interesting subversion of what the series was like. And it adds a nice bit of mystery back into everything. I like that the demon doesn't have an elaborate backstory. I like that we have no idea what happens to Robert Englund. The movie is razor focused on Heather and her fight. In terms of technical elements, it's incredible. The movie is very of the time. It was part of this wave of I'm not sure what to call it, but horror films became a little more artistically driven after Silence of the Lambs. Even if they were still cheap, they looked expensive. And there's a tone I can't quite describe. More serious than the slashers that reigned in the 80s, but not as gritty as the 2000s. They were kind of melodramatic and felt big. Candyman, Francis Ford Coppola's Dracula, Kenneth Branagh's Frankenstein. New Nightmare fits nicely into that trend. Mark Irwin was a cinematographer, and the movie looks great. There's superb lighting. It's a gorgeous movie. I like that it's in 178 as opposed to 235. The latter is a fantastic film look, but that's not what Craven is going for. It shouldn't look like a film. That's also why Heather's house has so many windows that we can see out of, so we can see the world and the natural lighting. Another nice touch I love is during a scene in Heather's room. Everything is off balance. Lamps are tilting back and forth. It's subtle, but effective. There's also great effects. The model work towards the end is so cool. I love watching that stuff blow up. And it's a brilliant set. Demon Freddy's lair is awesome. That does lead me to some negatives. There are some digital effects, not many, I can count them on one hand, but they're not very good. Well, two of them aren't very good. Freddy's glove coming out of the car seat looks really bad. They were trying to make it look like water, and it doesn't quite work. The other is with the matte painting. It's a great matte painting, but they put some digital stuff on top of it that looks really bad. My only other complaint is that I think Freddy is revealed too quickly. The film is clearly building up to the reveal of the new look, which really should be the moment in Nancy's closet, the miss me moment. Before that, we should really only see bits and pieces like the glove or Robert Englund's painting. But during Chase's funeral, they just show him. It's really anticlimactic, like he's in full daylight and it's not that short of a shot. I wonder if that scene, or that part of the scene, was maybe added later due to feelings that there wasn't enough Freddy. I do want to quickly mention J. Peter Robinson's score because it's amazing. Wes Craven's New Nightmare is sadly the lowest grossing movie in the series, only making $19.8 million. Still, its budget was only $8 million, so it wasn't a flop or anything, just disappointing. Reviews were very positive from critics, but audiences have always seemed to be split. Some people, incorrectly, really seem to hate this movie. I've seen reviews from Elm Street fans who will go on and on about how Craven sucks as a director actually, which is so weird to me. Look, you saw the title of the video, you know what I think. I watch it all the time, and every time I do, I just bounce up and down on the couch pointing at the screen saying, "That's so cool," or "That's so good." I have a lot of emotional attachment to this movie. It really is what made me a horror fan. Shortly after I saw New Nightmare for the first time, I started seeing commercials on TV for Freddy vs. Jason. And I immediately recognized Freddy, obviously. And then my mom probably explained that these characters were from these other movies. So I started tracking down all the movies of both series, recording them off TV, buying DVDs, and that led me to Michael Myers and then down the rabbit hole. New Nightmare was this big gateway drug for me in regards to horror. This is one of my favorite movies. I think it's brilliant. The mythology behind the new Freddy is vague enough to be mysterious, but specific enough that I can easily understand what's happening. Langenkamp is absolutely wonderful. She still has that strength and charm that made Nancy so endearing. But she's got 10 years more experience and really opened herself up. It's a great performance. I love the tone, I love the look, I love the story. It's easily my favorite of the Elm Street series and one of the best movies ever made, in my opinion.